Part 13. The DocWagon Job. DocWagon cards as valuable as a dragon's egg, if the contract is right. Marshall Parker, the locally famous multi-instrumentalist, owns Super Platinum coverage, probably funded by his patron XIII. Unwittingly, Marshall has become the key to a private enclave and invite-only party in order to fulfill a personal vendetta to kill a dragon in his own home. Strowther crafted the plan. They needed a way into XIII's lair, and Marshall Parker would be giving a concert there. If anything went wonky with Parker's vitals during that concert, the bio-monitor wristband that came with his top-level medical contract would send a DocWagon response team screaming toward him. Cat's team would be that response team. But first, they needed to borrow a van and get their team registered to respond to the future emergency. Simple as that. The South Renton DocWagon service facility was the size of a small hospital, lined with emergency room bay entrances on one side, and a corporate storefront on the other. Cat's small group of runners was trudging through the rain toward the neon "Emergency Vehicles Enter Here" sign, and then picked up the pace, jogging toward a trickle of shift change workers eager to get out of the rain. The four runners split up at an emergency room entrance. Kitsune, dressed in her new DocWagon digs, hung back near the entrance and pulled out a cigarette, trying to look the part of a worker on break. JT and Hegemon were dressed in street clothes. They carried duffel bags and wore their IDs on short chains around their necks. As they drifted closer to a cluster of incoming workers, Hegemon turned to JT and said, "I never get to see you high-threat response boys anymore."
They shifted my crew here this week, but who knows how long they'll keep us here,"
JT chimed back. They kept up the scripted small talk, blending into the crowd of workers with practiced ease. Cat's business lay on the corporate side. The place closed up at 5, leaving behind housekeeping drones and a handful of wage slaves hoping a little overtime could put them one more step up the corporate ladder. Cat was dressed in a Mortimer's of London business suit and carrying her satchel over one shoulder. After flashing her DocWagon ID to the first security officer she saw, no one else bothered to look in her direction. She was just another wage slave to them. Cat rode the elevator up to her destination. HR lived in a cubicle farm 4 floors up at the center of the facility. It may as well have been a cave. The air was crisp, recycled from blowers whirring high above her. After hours, the only hint of light came from the glowing green exit signs at either end of the room and the red LEDs of sleeping desktop monitors. Cat chose a station where the clusters were 4 instead of 12, and the extra space provided room for seats and a round table. A manager's station. She jacked in. Cat sucked in a cold breath and pushed out the distractions of the physical world. She ignored the desk, the cold, conditioned air pushing down on her, the empty office, and focused her attention on the electronic subroutines moving toward and away from the computer station. She sank down in her chair and let her mind imagine the world around her, fading to a mesh of wire diagrams and system access points. It didn't take long to find the employee record server and embed the 5 false identities. On a lark, Cat put her identity up for a commendation. At least when someone checked her records, they'd see she was good at her job. She shut down the access point and refocused her intrusion. Cat hacked through a succession of firewalls, burying herself within the root of the system where she could see the security system's data thread spooling towards the building's CPU. Door locks and security cameras radiated from the core like the spikes of a blowfish. Cat quickly suppressed the command line, draining away its memory allocation the way a kink in the line strips away a diver's oxygen. Without RAM and ROM delivering code, the camera stopped recording, and maglocks clunked open lazily. Excuse me, miss?" A voice drifted towards Kat from somewhere far away. Meanwhile, Kitsune had managed to casually slip into a garage bay from a newly unlocked side door. Kat took control of a garage bay camera, watching as the shaman strolled, head down, toward a bulky Ares Citymaster parked near the back of the bay. Bright red lettering on the side of the transport warned, "High Threat Response." Hejimon and JT followed, and Kat's 3 companions loaded into the Ares Citymaster. Kitsune revved the engine. "Miss?" More words trailed away from her consciousness, but the sound was garbled as if mumbled underwater. Kat zoomed in to see the vehicle's license tag. She populated the number in the system's active vehicle log for tomorrow's evening shift, linking it to Kitsune's forged ID as the driver along with the other forged identities of the crew. Finished with her tasks, the Decker allowed herself to focus on the external world. She surfaced slowly, the distant voice still a nagging data thread queuing at the edge of her consciousness. It drifted from an irritating wisp into the alarming sensation of a hand on her shoulder. Kat began the log-out process, and the reality of the world came screaming back. As her senses checked back in, the hand on her shoulder tightened. Kat clenched reflexively and fought off the urge to slap the hand away.
"I asked you, what are you doing at my terminal?"
The gruff voice belonged to a man in an ill-fitting business suit. His tie was undone, and the shirt's top 3 buttons open. Stubble collected around his chin and below his lip. His breath stank of stale mints. "Oh, I'm so sorry." Kat pushed away from the table and disconnected her data jack. She tried to keep the tremble out of her voice but failed. She patted her satchel absently. They told me you were already gone for the evening."
"Who were they?"
Kat started to speak but snapped her mouth shut. She put her finger up to her lips as if to indicate that someone might be listening. She took a long look around the room, swiveling her head dramatically, giving herself time to remember the lie they rehearsed. I don't think I'm supposed to tell you that."
"I said, what are you doing at my station?"
2 shadows cut across the distant green light of the exit sign mounted across the room. Her heart beat faster. Kat glanced over to see a pair of security guards standing there. The Decker moistened her dry lips and smiled conspiratorially. "Okay. I have to tell someone, right?"
"I think you'd better start talking right now."
She caught a quick look at the nameplate on the desk. Patrick Goodman. The 2 guards were moving towards them now. Their walkie-talkies squawked and squealed, announcing their arrival. Kat leaned into Patrick Goodman and whispered, "Well, Mr. Goodman, corporate sent me down to run some data before the buyout."
"What buyout?"
Beneath the rush of hot, minty breath came the familiar stench of bourbon. He looked over at the guards who were frozen in place now, unsure of how to react. He made a fumbling, clumsy attempt to fix his thick gray tie and repeated his question in a whisper. "Well, sir, corporate received an offer from Crash Cart to purchase this location. There are already arrangements in place to shift this service personnel to other locations. They sent me ahead to see if there was anything on the administrative side worth salvaging." Patrick Goodman suddenly looked ill. He didn't mouth another word until an officer's walkie-talkie squawked again, pulling the manager out of his trance.
I think you should carry on."
"Thank you, sir." She paused, freestyling now, and added, "Well, what they said about you was right." He stared at her curiously, his head tilted slightly to one side, in a way that reminded her of Fluff. Kat had to force herself to stop grinning long enough to explain. "Well, you see, you can make the tough choices." She then topped it all off with a wink. Patrick Goodman beamed. He finally straightened his tie enough to finish buttoning his shirt. He strolled away, back straight and shoulders high. The guards seemed satisfied enough by this that they continued their patrol. Once all the men were gone, Kat ducked into the closest stairwell and made her way down to the first floor. The Ares city master was waiting for her out front. Hegemon opened the door and helped her inside. "Any trouble?" "Nothing I couldn't handle." She patted her satchel. Fluff mewled beneath the leather.
JT growled, "You gotta stop dragging that frackin' kitten along everywhere we go. It isn't healthy. I think it loses a life every time you stuff it into the bag."
Kat rolled her eyes. "Nice work, everybody. We have the wills. Now all we need is the patient." The group sped away along the I-5 toward the giant man-made mountain that is the Renraku arcology.